So good evening and welcome to the weekly Dharma gathering online. We're really excited to have you, and I'm super excited to have my friend and wonderful Dharma teacher, Trinley Busby, who's also a Shastri. So let me just read Trinley's bio very quickly, and then we'll get into the topic. So tonight's topic is a really awesome one, a timely one, minimizing harm and an internal and external exploration. And here we are. Is it Busby or Busby?
Busby.
Busby, okay. Trinley Busby is a teacher in the Shambhala lineage. Her volunteer and contract work in the area of housing and poverty activism led her to the field of frontline social service support work in Vancouver's downtown east side in 2006. Trinley is a Canadian from Canada. She worked with populations experiencing homelessness who live with concurrent mental health and substance abuse challenges. Since that time, Trinley has been uniting her experiences as a meditator with her work as an activist. So I'm really excited to have Trinley here. For those of you who've never been here before, I'll just tell you how the evening goes. We start with an intro from me, and then we'll go to a guided meditation by the teacher, then the Dharma talk, Q&A, and then we close with some announcements. The Q&A, I'll review this once we get there, is that we'll just have you, if you have a question, you can press the function that says raise your hand if you hover over your name. So raise my hand, and then we'll pull you up. If you don't want to be seen on the video, you can just mute your video, but just speak your question. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Trin.
Thanks, Shantae. Good evening, everybody. It's really funny, peculiar, and funny, haha, to be here in this virtual world and not see who's here. But welcome to everybody who's here this evening, and thanks for coming. I want to also thank Shantae and Adriana and Ashley and Alex and so many people who have been working really with a lot of exertion and a lot of love and a lot of care to have this space open and to really bring in a lot of different voices and people and bodies and topics, and really the forefront of seeing how there is no exclusion in the Dharma, and that all kind of inquiry is necessary and so valuable in our exploration. So thanks to the team of the weekly Dharma gatherings. And before I begin with a guided meditation practice, I just want to read something from a woman. Her name is Chelsea Vowell. She's a Métis woman from Edmonton, Alberta. She writes, if we think of territorial acknowledgements as sites of potential disruption, they can be transformative acts that to some extent undo Indigenous erasure. I believe this to be true as long as these acknowledgements discomfort both those speaking and hearing the words. The fact of Indigenous presence should force non-Indigenous peoples to confront their own place on these lands. Chelsea goes on to prompt a dialogue around why is this acknowledgement happening? And I was thinking about this in terms of this talk and the work that the exploration that we'll be on this evening together. And the topic is minimizing harm and internal and external exploration. And when Chelsea says that to some extent, when we do a territorial acknowledgement, we could lead to some extent, undoing Indigenous erasure. So we are, by acknowledging what has happened, what has come before, where we are, how we got here, who and at what cost brought us here, what happened when we got here. You know, when we attend to that history, when we acknowledge that history, there is a feeling, a knowing of some little liberation from ignorance. Just undoing what hasn't been at the forefront before, what through white supremacy hasn't been taught as important, and how, as a white person, how that impacts me, the ignorance and the not knowing. So really the work that we're doing is to minimize harm, both internally and externally. And part of that is coming into knowing what we don't know and acknowledging what's come before. So I'm going to guide us through a practice, and then we'll start to explore the principles of some principles of harm reduction. So where you are in whatever space you're in, just coming into the space. And really, if you're a person who has practiced meditation a lot in your life, I'll ask you just to have new ears and to hear beyond what you think you know. So just feeling this place that you're at, really encouraging you to not shift into thinking you need to be another way. There isn't really another person who's the meditator, there's just you. So wherever you're sitting, if it's on the floor, in a chair, just having a sense of your body and how your body is today and how it wants to rest. So you could have a sense of your feet on the floor or crossed on a cushion. And sitting isn't the only way to practice meditation. So if you're standing or lying down, just having a sense of being in your body and a relaxed but also awake position. There's a sense of attending to what is present. Your eyes could be open or closed. What we'll attend to, or what we'll come back to, is feeling of the breath in the body. There's a naturalness, like the tides moving in and out, of how the body breathes, how it naturally stays in presence. And as we feel the body breathing and attending to that felt sense, we don't have to suppress or negate any sensation or thoughts, any feeling or sounds arising. There's a sense that the body breathing just accommodates all of it, accommodates the dynamism of the movement of the mind, that there's beauty and appreciation for how the mind moves and how the body understands the communication of the world through the senses. The feeling of the body breathing allows and accommodates for all thoughts that arise. And for as long as they abide, and they cease, falling back into the movement of the breath in the body. We really begin the journey of minimizing harm by not excluding any part of our being. Let go of trying to manipulate ourselves into another now, wanting things to be different. Just really allowing and accommodating. So we'll transition into the topic for this evening, and we don't have to stop doing anything. You can listen from the same place of feeling the breath moving in the body throughout our time together, and yeah, feeling your mind and your breath as we're going through the exploration together. So, the topic that I chose for this evening is the title was Minimizing Harm and Internal and External Exploration. And the really what I'm going to offer in terms of an exploration, and only an exploration, it's not an ideology, it's not a teaching, it's not like a set of rules, it's merely something that has been helpful in my life and in work that I've done in very diverse spaces, where there's a lot of different positionality and a lot of different lived experiences. And um, um, so we don't all know each other, understand each other, and this framework has been helpful in these professional settings and also different communities of practice settings. So it's just an exploration. I'm in the exploration myself and invite you to be in it as well. I'm going to offer a set of principles that come from the tradition of harm reduction. Um, Harm reduction was it arose in the early 80s when the HIV and AIDS epidemic was really mm, becoming very rampant. And it arose specifically to help mitigate the pathogen from transferring with IV drug users, and to reduce the spread of the HIV virus. And how I came into it was working in harm reduction settings in Vancouver, Canada, working with people that experience homelessness and were active IV drug users. And then it's funny because what is the context now? Why am I introducing this now? And I think I found that I just found the principles to be so helpful in orienting to groups of people that have very, very different lived experiences, and how we open instead of close to difference, and how we support instead of judge, and um, how we love instead of being punitive, and how we see through all the stories and narratives we've been told about what is right and wrong, into a different way of holding relationship with people. And I find, in terms of a Dharma community, a community of practitioners, more and more it had become kind of prominent that as we get together to practice with no kind of set of principles of how we are together as community, we hurt one another intentionally or unintentionally, through ignorance or through just kind of not caring enough. And so these principles are something that I've offered in the context of leading retreats and just whenever there's some kind of group work that's happening. Of course, the Buddha in the first turning gave the teachings of the Tripitaka, and the Vinaya was the basket of discipline, and was really to hold communities of practitioners, at first monks and nuns, and then in relationship with lay practitioners, in things that were helpful to maintain skillfulness when we're in relationship to one another. Um, there's a lot of guidelines in the Vinaya, um, and probably some of those are not relevant today, and they in themselves might cause some harm. So I'm just offering, and again, I'm in this exploration about these 4 principles. There are 4 principles within the structure of harm reduction, and just seeing how they might help us be in community and in a kind of fuller way. So I'm going to walk through just these 4 principles, and then I'll just say what the 4 are, and then just kind of the exploration is internal and external. So I'll give some example of how I find that might be helpful as an orientation of how they might work internally and externally. And then when I'm saying reducing or minimizing harm, when I'm saying the word harm, I'm meaning, I'm defining it as actual or potential ill effect or danger, or to have an adverse effect on. So harm is actual or potential ill effect. I have an ill effect, or I pose a danger to, or I have an adverse effect on another person. So we're trying to, through these principles, what is being offered is a way to potentially minimize or reduce the potential ill effect, danger, or adverse effect. The first principle comes from, and these 4 come from a collective based in Chicago called Just Practice, and Shahira Hassan, who I don't know personally, but is a harm reduction, working in harm reduction. I don't think that they're based in Chicago anymore, but I think that these 4 come from that collective of practice, and there are many principles in harm reduction altogether, but these 4 were just very concise, and so that's why I'm offering them. So the first one is each individual is treated with dignity, and dignity means the state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect. 2, individuals are expected to take responsibility for their behavior. 3, no predefined outcomes. And 4, relationship is paramount. So each individual is treated with dignity. Individuals are expected to take responsibility for their own behavior. No predefined outcomes, and relationship is paramount. So 4 principles that could guide us internally in our own practice, and then externally in community with one another. So the first one I really see as feel as a view, and when I think of this, when I feel this in my practice internally, um, when I there's like a sense of like how when I was getting the practice, like a wholeness, that there's nothing that I experience that is unworthy of respect or honor, honoring. And just simply, that honoring is the acknowledgement that some kind of communication is arising in my mind and my body and saying, hey, I'm here, you know? So there's this honoring or respecting and not negating, suppressing, neglecting parts of our experience, parts of my experience, my internal experience. I'm trying to come into an exploration and a confidence of what does it mean for every moment of my experience to be worthy of honor and respect. And more so, I have the experience of when I don't do that, when I don't honor and respect the pain that I'm feeling, um, when I don't honor and respect the discomfort, the overwhelm, the whatever it might be that feels too something to be in relationship with. And especially as I'd say, as meditators, there can be this kind of falsity of thinking that we're only doing something right if we're still at peace. Like somehow abiding in this realm of only positive emotionality and only positive felt sense. And I think that that is detrimental in terms of having a relationship to the wholeness of our humanity, of our actual being. So internally, this first one of treating each individual, I'll say each moment, each part of my being with respect and with honoring it is in practice just simply really accommodating everything that is there. And I don't have to go into it. I don't have to kind of get drowned in it, but I do acknowledge it. I do attend. I do say, I know you're there. So on an external level, then that allows for the wholeness of others. That there's some kind of respect and honor that I can hold for the difference of no, I don't agree, no, I don't understand. But there's some kind of I can hold I can hold others with dignity, and that there can be some sense of respect for the for others' lived experience, for other people that I don't know, that I don't agree with. So in community, there's many people that I'm in community with, and I won't know them all. I won't know their whole lives, but having enough kind of accommodation to be curious and open and to be in a kind of dance of respect is helpful. Sometimes also respect means being direct and saying you're causing harm. And sometimes having, you know, treating ourselves with dignity is being able to walk away from another person when we need to. So again, exploration, there's like lots of ground in there that we could get into. Second one is individuals are expected to take responsibility for their own behavior And I'm using a definition of responsibility that comes from Nick Montgomery and Carla Bergman, their book Joyful Militancy. And they break it into response and a hyphen ability, saying capacities to remain responsive to changing situations. So we're expected to remain responsive to changing situations. That's the principle. That's the principle. Expected to remain responsive to changing situations. So as the body sits and the when we practice, the situations are changing all the time. We have phenomena arising and coming back in, arising, ceasing. We have thoughts arising, ceasing. Um, we have pain in the body. We have all sorts of things um, happening. So we're responsive to the changing situations. I think we're curious about, we're accommodating, we're in relationship to, and that's the responsive nature of practice. Um, it's the kind of not checking out, and also not manipulating what's happening. The response is to actually be in relationship with, over and over and over again, directly in relationship. That's what a meditation practice is asking of us, is to be in direct relationship with our experience, seeing the overlays, seeing our projections, seeing the whole thing, and again coming back and being in relationship with, being responsive to, not being responsive uh, in the story. It's like actually directly responsive to what's happening. So externally, um, if I'm expected within a community who shares these principles to take responsibility for my behaviors, then that means remaining responsive to changing situations. It's allowing for what I don't know, what I don't understand. It's allowing for flexibility. It's allowing for receiving feedback and being attentive to the feedback. I don't know what I don't know. And certainly, meditation is so much about what we don't know and trying to be in the most intimate relationship with that. And community gives us that, on a very relative level all the time. It allows us to be in relationship with what we don't know, what we don't understand, what we don't like. And can we be uh, can we build our capacity to remain responsive to changing situations, to learn and to grow? And this comes back to, everything is worthy. It's worthy because it has potential for us to wake up, to learn, to grow. That's why it's worthy. That's why difference, even when I don't agree, there's still this potentiality to wake up, even to what I don't want to be, even to how I don't want to be. The third is no predefined outcomes. So internally, when I practice, my exploration has brought me to this point of, like, I just think it's a bad setup. I think it's a bad setup to have a predefined outcome of what practice is gonna look like, supposed to look like, should look like, what I've read it's supposed to be. All these things. It's just a bad setup. Um, like knowing how it's gonna be, what it should be, all of those things. We just can't know. We simply can't know. And there's some kind of very hard part of trying to control, our experience when we try to have these predefined outcomes in our practice. Very, achievement oriented comes a lot from our kind of conditioning in a um, capitalist society. So externally, I'm going to read another part from Joyful Militancy, which I really appreciate. They say again, Nick Montgomery and Carla Bergman say, optimism and pessimism are two sides of the same coin. Both try to remove uncertainty from the world. Both foster certitude about how things will turn out, whether good or bad. Optimism and pessimism can provide a sense of comfort at the expense of openness and the capacity to hang out in complexity. So, I mean, community is nothing if it's not complex. Human beings are so complex, and then you get your oneself and then a few other people together. And yeah, we're trying to oftentimes trying to come to some sense of certitude. But what this principle is saying, hey, let's not do that. Let's be out of a comfort zone, because when we're trying to kind of smash everybody into a certitude, what are often those behaviors that we employ? When we have to know the outcome of things, how do we behave with others? And also, just even the certitude or certainty, even when we're certain of things, it's like, where do those knowings come from? What conditioning have we inherited that we think that we know certain things about how things should be, because other people have been given other stories and narratives and so on of how they feel things should be, and often those can clash. So to stay in certitude or to try to have some kind of control or to predefine outcomes can often cause a polarity and disconnect and not openness or curiosity. So we see this internally in our bodies in rigidity and real militancy, and then rigid militancy. And then we also see that externally in a different kind of rigid militancy within our communities of practice. I love in some communities of practice that I'm in, it's like the moving of the furniture at the Dharma Center, and that kind of rigid militancy of it doesn't go there. And who says? It's a silly example, but it's maybe other people will relate to that one. And so the last one is relationship is paramount. So relation, and what relation is about is context and connection. So what is paramount is what we kind of are, the context and what we're in connection with. I really, there's a Christian theologian named Paul Tillich, and I cite him often in his definition of love because I think it's a very profound definition. And he terms love as the drive towards the unity of the separate, the drive towards the unity of the separate. So for me, that's what relationship is asking, is the drive towards that which is separate, you know. So in internally in a meditation practice, um, it's integration. It's like the wholeness of my mind, body, speech, my um, the entirety of my experience. It's the bringing together the parts that have been left behind, the parts that have believed the story of unworthiness, the parts that that the world has given the narrative are not important, um, lesser than, um, not appropriate, you know. So the drive towards the unity of that which is separate is like this relationship is paramount, and that's such a beautiful part of our meditation practice, is that that actual unifying, integrating, and therefore I believe, in my experience, healing can happen. I think that also can take a lot of other support that is not solely based on a meditation practice, and that's been true in my life. So I'm not saying independently of other supports and other methods, but in relationship with, um, can be extremely healing and integrating. And then in on an external level, relationship is paramount. This last principle, I want to read something from Megan Swoboda, um, who is a environmental and social justice activist. Um, she says, our survival depends on the relationships we build. Some relationships are utilitarian, and sometimes that's okay. If I can be useful to others, I should be. I am not important, but what I do and don't do matters. My actions and inactions affect everyone and everything around me. We all play our roles. None is more important than the others, but we all affect each other. Some roles and strategies seem insignificant and ineffective, but altogether, all our different tactics and strategies and roles can get us what we need to survive and thrive. But it is not a sure thing. We must fight for it. So I think that that is true in this principle of relationship as paramount in terms of community. We all have a different role. And when we value that, when we see that, when we respect that, it allows for uh, a different kind of situation than again, a sort of an entrenchment in individualization, which we've all been. I shouldn't say all, but I think a lot of people have been kind of conditioned into that. There's a much more collective approach in this relationship is paramount when we're looking at an external and a community situation, a communal situation, that we can value a wholeness over uh, just the individual parts, that we start to be, we minimize harm, but actually starting to be in relationship with one another across difference, valuing difference. Um, and again, I think the relationship is paramount. Doesn't mean that anything goes. That we need to be kind of actively engaged always with, you sort of really giving feedback and receiving feedback, and um, knowing our own boundaries in relationship with others, and what that means, that when we don't give up the relationship to ourselves and our embodiment and our uh, feeling of well-being at the cost of being in a community of people that might not actually be invested in these relationships in the same way. So this is the exploration and what I have to offer. I'm not an expert. I think it's messy. I think that there is no kind of, there isn't any certitude. It's just it's a way that we could begin to explore ourselves and each other in practice, individual and collectively. Um, and and I think one of the um, main kind of things around harm reduction is that it really posits that each individual is the expert in their own lives, and I really really believe that. So it's up to you. Like if this is useful, helpful, interesting to you, great. If not, also great. And yeah, I think that's what I have to share. And if there's questions, I'm happy to try to be in an exploration and dialogue with people.
So thank you so much, Trinley. It was really great to sort of get that in-depth teaching. And so for the folks who are on live, if you have questions, just to remind you that you can just raise your hand virtually, hover over your name, and I can allow you to talk. And then if you don't want to be, we're recording. So if you don't want your face recorded, you can just mute your video at the bottom left of your screen, stop video. So we'll take some Q&A, and then we'll have some announcements, and then we'll close. So feel free to ask away. If you don't mind, as the host, I actually have a question about, again, thank you. And it was really good to hear. I've heard you give some shorter versions of this, but it was, I really feel like I learned a lot. I guess I had a question. It's a little bit, it's a little like oriented toward just, let's talk about implementation and actualization. Because sometimes I notice as someone who really has been modeling, I've done a lot of training in harm reduction, and in some ways kind of forgot about it and made some assumptions about space I was in. And so really been bringing that back into spaces as an academic, doing that with my students. I always do that at the beginning of the semester and remind the students who come to community agreements and other spaces. And I'm wondering about sort of two parts. So one is like kind of actualizing that, and maybe that's just more about creating space and reminding people of that space. And the other is then accountability. Like what happens when the community agreements are broken? What happens when, and I don't mean just like, sometimes you can deal with one-on-one stuff and sometimes you can't, but I mean like we've agreed to things as a community, like speak from the eye, and what happens when, how do we begin to build our confidence in implementing these, in implementing harm reduction and coming up, identifying what harm is happening in our homes or in our families or in our work, and then trying to really kind of implement at least these four principles.
Yeah, thanks. That's I think is a big part of something that I missed that I wanted to touch on is and it's part of that your first part of the actualizing is such a big question for me in terms of like bringing this and potentially making a bridge from communities of uh, a practice of that actually implement a harm reduction model in terms of like a professional public health setting. That's really where these principles come from, is public health settings, you know. And so it's not a direct transferable situation or even obvious. I think, you know, like um, I was trained. It was like a forefront principle. We were in a professional setting. It was like the guidelines of how we worked with people, and so I could see the outcomes and trust the outcomes of what kind of depth of relationship that way of being with people built. And so the actualizing of that in terms of a non-professional setting or a different community setting, a community of practice, let's say like a Dharma community or a yoga community, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually helpful or useful. That's why I'm also kind of saying that I'm not an expert, and I'm trying to be in relationship with, is this helpful? There's other people that are in activist spaces and movement spaces that are really doing amazing, like very, I think, on the edge and a progressive edge, that are saying like, yeah, actually this model of harm reduction is very useful in movement spaces and activist spaces, and it does give an orientation for which we can collectively, or as much as possible collectively, come from, you know. And that doesn't, I think it's like, to me it's a practice. It's like, you know, it's so funny to kind of do this in an hour and a half. And I worked in harm reduction for over 10 years, um, and I will always be in a learning space when it's coming to that, because you bump up, and I think it's like practice of meditation practice. You bump up into what you don't think you can understand, know, handle, like, all of those things. And then you have to come back to like, what am I committed to? You know, what am I committed to? And that's just a lifelong journey and practice. Um, and then I think, you know, in terms of the accountability, shit, we're just like doing not that great of a job altogether. So I'll say, I'm going to say specifically my experience in Shambhala um, centers, which is my context of community of practice. Um, I think there hasn't been a lot of sense of accountability. Um, so, um, you know, I remember doing a month-long practice, and we would take the precepts. We would take a set of precepts, and that was the only time that we ever had some kind of community agreements of what we were going to not do during that month of practice. Really helpful. And then it's like, well, why does that go by the wayside when we're together in other situations? Because it is helpful when we're such a divergent set of group of people, that we have something that we're being like, and the accountability is like, hey, remember we said we were not going to do that. Or that there's a ability for an intervention to happen, that like harm reduction is not about the absence of harm, you know. And I think that that's the truism. Like, we are living this life, and each one of us knows that harm is going to happen. We are going to have adverse things, dangerous things happen in our life. But what I like about harm reduction is that the consequence, we can actually work with the impact of, to reduce the negativity of the consequence. And part of that is about accountability. The negative impact of the consequence, shifts when there's some sense of accountability happening. And that happens in all sorts of ways. And I know that you know this. It's like an intervention when there's when white supremacy enacts itself in a space with one BIPOC person in it, and all the rest of us are white, you know. And so it's like the how we reduce the harm, how we reduce the negative impact is that uh, at least one white person steps in and does the intervention so that the BIPOC person is not being harmed more and more and more, you know. This is one example, but you know, I know that you can probably think of a million.
That's really helpful. Actually, it's really helpful in thinking about actualizing that and taking more accountability myself of how to really be just have that be more second nature in spaces where I have some say in how things are shaped. So it's really, really, this has been really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Gail, I know you came on late, but do you maybe have any questions that you want to ask or?
I guess I came in late. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I was thinking about, I understand that Trinley is going to be teaching exactly this up at Karma Choling. And so I kind of came in because I wanted to understand what it was about. In my path forward, I see a need to, when I'm in situations like you've talked about, in a circle with a number of people that are not all white people like me, how I can go and hold space and, you know, as much as possible, make it be safe for everyone to speak and be as they actually are. So that's why I was tuning in to see how this might manifest. So.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. I don't think we know each other, but maybe I'll meet you at Karma Choling. I feel like I've introduced this practice, these 4 sets of principles at a number of retreats now, and I think it's been my experience that it's always a little offsetting for people. They don't understand the relationship in the context of being at a Dharma retreat and then introducing principles of harm reduction. But kind of as we go through the awkwardness of why it might be helpful and how it might be helpful and so on, and then go through the retreat itself, every single time, inevitably, without fail so far, people have come back to the principles. And so, like I was saying, when I was talking to Shantae, there's something that allows for, even if everybody's not completely on board, it allows for this conversation to happen and an intervention to happen that kind of holds the principles too while we're in those interventions, which is, I think, a very, very caring and loving way of kind of intervening and being in conversation with people when we hold those 4 principles. Like, it's not like a subset of something that we do, but we're actually doing it when we're kind of intervening and stuff. So I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but it's the kind of being it and doing it, and that really helps. Like we're holding the awkwardness with worth and respect, and not kind of trying to predefine like an outcome, like you have to come along and get on board and do it our way or something, because that goes against that principle. So you kind of stay in congruence with those, or not, you don't kind of, you stay in congruence with those principles, and that actually helps things shift really a lot. So I think it just builds a relationship actually, instead of the opposite. It's been my experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trinley. Thank you so much for this talk and the meditation too. Also, I really want to thank you for the meditation. It was really, really helpful. I really needed that. I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. Trinley, will you just say, since Gail brought it up and I forgot, next month you're leading a retreat on this in June?
I'm going to be at Karma Choling, which is a retreat center in Vermont. We're going to do a 2-day, it's June 15th and 16th. It's a 2-day kind of deep dive of the 4 principles of harm reduction in terms of our internal landscape and external landscape. And yeah, it's kind of more a sense of being it and being in it and seeing how that affects our relationships to ourselves and one another.
Great. So please, karmacholing.org, KARMECHOLING.org, if you're interested in that, with Shashri Trinley Busby. And then I just want to make a couple of announcements for the next 2 August, what month is it? May online weekly Dharma gatherings. Next week, Naoko Kojima will be from New York, will be leading, I forgot to say Trinley's in Pittsburgh. Naoko will be leading a talk on inclusivity. It's not at all what you think. And that'll be hosted by Reese Whitworth. And Naoko is an inclusivity warrior, which is a volunteer position created in Shambhala in 2017. Really, actually, working with these principles, it's about helping create a well-hosted environment and facilitating social dynamics. Naoko will be talking about what she really learned. And then the following week is some weirdo named Shantae Paradigm Smalls teaching. I'll be teaching. Okay, my dog just jumped. I'll be teaching about sobriety and meditation. So also somewhat in this realm of harm reduction. I'm really talking about what those kind of those different lineages could learn from one another. So, and then in June we'll have Matt Parkinson from Asheville, North Carolina, talking about depression and meditation. So it's going to be really great. Please feel free to join us live, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or register and watch anytime. So thank you all. Any last words?
Yeah, I just want to, I'd like to just dedicate the merit to any kind of merit or anything that we've derived from this exploration, our practice, the conversation, inspiration, heart, sense of connection to openness and awake heart. We'd like to offer that to all beings. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your practice and being here. And thank you, Shantae, and the whole team. Really amazing work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.